Hey folks, I'm here at the White House, Washington, D.C. White House is just behind me here. I figured that there was no better place to talk about what all this Russophobia, Russiagate, allegations that Trump is working for Russia, no better place to talk about what that's really about. It's really about two words, oil and gas. All right, let's do a quick historical review. So folks will remember that in the 1990s, relations between the USA and Russia were very good. Boris Yeltsin was the president, the Soviet Union had just fallen, and at that point, Russia was basically being economically demolished at that point. So you had the fall of the Soviet Union, and during that period in the 1990s, you had all the factories in Russia closing their doors. You had something like 80% of the farms in Russia going bankrupt. You had something between 20 to 30% unemployment. They started having to import their food from American agribusiness corporations, and the country was just economically demolished. It was just a complete mess. And at that time, of course, as Wall Street corporations are in there, and as Russia's being reduced to almost a captive market, at that point, there was a very good relationship. Russia was just kind of a captive market, a sphere of influence for Wall Street corporations. Then that changed. You had Vladimir Putin, whose academic dissertation basically argued, in 1997, he published this academic dissertation arguing the way Russia could fix up their economy was by creating two national champions, or super corporations that would be controlled by the Russian government that could be rebooting the economy. And he created Gazprom and Rosneft, a state-controlled oil company, a state-controlled natural gas company, and they basically rebooted the Russian economy. The government of Russia, they started selling oil and natural gas around the world, and the revenue was then been used, they're restarting the Russian agriculture, Russian industrial output is increasing. It basically rebooted the Russian economy. Their standard of living started rising again, and Russia's economy actually started to improve. But all of a sudden, Russia wasn't a captive sphere of influence anymore. It wasn't an economic, captive market. It was actually a rival on the international markets. Countries across Eastern Europe started buying their oil and gas from Russia and from the Russian government-controlled oil and gas companies. Russia was a competitor on the international energy markets once again, and they were able to start building up a domestic economy. Then you have to throw into the fact that, on top of the fact that Russia was able to rebuild its economy, build up two big government-controlled energy corporations that were competing with Wall Street, you have to then keep in mind that hydraulic fracking has completely revolutionized the energy markets. Now, all of a sudden, the USA domestically has huge amounts of shale gas, natural gas coming out of our shale, oil coming out of our shale. At this point in the United States, every day we produce 11 million barrels of oil, right? That's as of July 18th, oil production in the United States, all-time high, now exceeds 11 million barrels of oil a day. So as Russia is rising on the market, selling oil and gas in competition with Wall Street, meanwhile, in the USA, we're producing way more oil and gas than we ever have. And this creates a big problem because as the energy market in the US, the domestic oil production, the domestic natural gas production is expanding, Russia is also emerging to be a much stronger country selling lots of oil and gas on the international markets. So during his presidential campaign, Donald Trump said what I think is common sense and what most Americans want, which is to get along with Russia. Russia's a huge country, it's a superpower, it's, why would you not want to get along with Russia, right? It just makes sense. We want to have a good relationship with important countries. Why would we not want to get along with Russia? Well, the oil and the gas companies don't want to get along with Russia because Russia is a competitor. And, at this point, there's all kinds of outrage about Nord Stream 2 coming from mainstream media. And this is just a natural gas pipeline. At this point, the European Union gets 38% of its natural gas from Russia. And that is infuriating, right? As Tim Ryan, a congressman from Ohio, put it on the floor of Congress, he said, that our allies in Europe should be getting their gas from us. That doesn't make any sense. If you're in Germany, why would you import natural gas from all the way from the other side of the world when you can get it from Russia, which is very close by? I mean, look at a map. It doesn't make sense for European countries to be importing natural gas from the United States. They would import it from Russia. This is a battle for markets, and Russia used to be kind of a this country that had just been demolished by the fall of the Soviet Union, but that was fixed up by controlling their natural resources, by the Russian government taking control of their energy resources, kicking BP out of the country, kicking HSBC Bank and these Wall Street corporations out of the country. By Russia taking control of its natural resources, they've actually been able to vastly improve the country, and that is the problem. They want a captive market. Wall Street wants the entire world to be poor, and dependent and trading with them. And Russia has largely challenged that. Now, this idea that President Trump is working for Vladimir Putin is rather absurd. In fact, we've seen Trump do things against Russia and against its allies that the Obama administration wouldn't even do. The Obama administration never directly attacked the Syrian government. Well, Trump has done that already. He's attacked the Syrian government. So this notion is absurd, but this is McCarthyism. And it shows that the McCarthyism was never really about ideology. It wasn't about communism. It was about power, because at the beginning of the 20th century, both Russia and China were deeply impoverished countries. They were both, deeply poor countries, mass starvation, mass illiteracy. They weren't producing anything. And over the course of the 20th century, when they had socialist revolutions, Russia and China became superpowers. China is now at this point the second largest economy in the world, producing half the steel on Earth, half the copper on Earth, biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. Russia at this point, over the course of the 20th century, you had them, becoming the world's leading producer of steel. You had them, building up industrialization. They had the world's hydroelectric power plant, the world's largest hydroelectric power plant in the 1930s. And during the 5-year plans in the 1930s, we saw Russia rising up and becoming this very, very strong, economically powerful country, while the rest of the world was having a Great Depression. And that's what Wall Street fears. Monopolism, capitalism, imperialism, this is all about keeping countries poor, keeping the world poor so that Wall Street and London can stay rich. And over the course of the 20th century, Russia and China broke out of that system and began developing and industrializing and becoming richer as countries. Now, Russia then, you had the fall of the Soviet Union and the catastrophe that followed that, but Putin has fixed a lot of that up, and Russia is once again rising and raising the standard of living and building it up. And that's what Wall Street and London don't like. They don't want any independent country. They don't want any competitor, right? It's about maintaining a monopoly. And so, this idea that Trump should be constantly trying to distance himself from Russia, it's a threat, right? It's a demand, right? We remember how for years the Democrats were constantly being accused of being soft on communism. And because of that, we saw Democrats do things like the Korean War and the Vietnam War being escalated under Johnson, and we saw that because the Democrats were constantly on the defensive, trying to prove that they were not soft on the Soviet Union. So now we see Donald Trump with this constant allegation that he's soft on Putin being pushed, right? He better prove himself. He better prove that he's not soft on those Russians. He better prove that he's willing to attack countries and bomb countries and be militaristic. He's on the defensive. It's about keeping Trump on the defensive so that he can be doing the bidding and carrying out the policies that Wall Street and the Pentagon want to see. So that's really what this whole thing is about. Russiagate, it's all about oil and gas. It's about the fact that Russia is a competitor once again. They've asserted themselves, and Wall Street and London cannot stand that.